Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
And ghouls, it's your old pal Sick Pot 2 here, joined by my good fiend Steve Baxi for another episode of Ghouly Gentlemen.
Sick Pot 2, how you doing?
Pretty good, bro.
Man.
Anyway, yes, today we're wrapping up Ghouly Gentlemen Horror Month. It came and went too fast. I don't know what to tell you. We're finishing it off with a discussion topic, and today we're discussing about we're discussing the art, or I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, but like horror art. So I don't want to talk about like the art of how you scare someone. I don't want to talk about, like, this movie is scary and here's a good scene why. Maybe a little bit with movies. I'm more just talking about, like, single pieces of art that are, like, objectively this is horror. And it's the funniest thing that got me here as to what put this topic in my head and what made me want to discuss it. I've been getting pretty hard into maker YouTube as of late, like crafts and projects that people are doing. And one of those projects is this guy that does sculptures, like clay polymer sculptures, and he just, does them and stuff. And he likes to do realistic, cursed, and this is just straight up like horror art sculptures of iconic characters and things. And one of the ones he did was Kirby with like this giant gaping mouth full of teeth, these creepy fucking like little claw hands on those weird stubby arms, which he made like oddly muscular. And then the detail that just fucking, like, was so goddamn inspired and cursed, and kind of just put this into my head. I'm like, no, this is terrifying. As he put, like, faces and hands trying to escape out of Kirby's back. Just on the back of the skull. Like, little tiny hands, like, pressing against the inside of the skin was the image it created. And, like faces pushed up against it. And it just reminded me of, like, there's shots of that in, like, Freddy Krueger, when he, like, took his shirt off the one time. You saw, like, the faces of the souls he killed trapped on his body and shit. And I fucking love horror so much, and I feel like an under-discussed aspect of it is the amount of work that goes into creating the imagery associated with horror, creating the kind of like visual representation of what is scary and what makes a piece like fuck. And I think it's interesting because horror is probably one of the things best suited to art, but I don't think it gets brought up. I don't really hear people talk about horror art all that much, because a lot of art, not all everything, of course, there's always exceptions, but a lot of art is dependent upon exaggeration. The the more you overemphasize and the more detail you add to a thing, or the more you exaggerate certain elements of a body or the angles of things, the more striking, the more dynamic, the more fascinating it becomes to just visually see. And horror just kind of, you can just play with that all day, you know? You put like too many teeth on a thing, you exaggerate the number of teeth that something has, and it's suddenly just like instantly it just goes into horror and just becomes like, you can make anything creepy with that. You take like a fucking perfectly innocent child's toy, but you give it a lot of fucking teeth and it just instantly becomes scary. And that's fascinating to me.
If you're on like internet rabbit holes about this kind of stuff, because you mentioned Kirby, but like there's a lot of examples of like things that are like seemingly innocent that have like found their way into a weird internet rabbit hole of how do we make them into like weird cosmic entities of horror. And the other big one for that realm of things is actually Garfield. And like how Garfield comics have become this weird sort of trip down the multitudes of and the horror of human existence, and like how John is just like trapped in this endless loop of this completely ineffectual cat that is just kind of sucking away at his life force through all time, and that Garfield is drawn in these weird kind of exaggerated Lovecraftian poses because he is just this constant soul-sucking entity. And that shit is weird, man.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. The internet's just got like this love-hate relationship with making things cursed, you know? Like, have you seen all the weird Thomas the Train fucking art? It's so terrifying.
I hate those so much because I always love Thomas the Tank Engine, and turning him into like a cursed demon thing just fucks with me.
Yeah, no, like there's a great fucking loop animation someone did of like him coming out of a tunnel and like crawling out of the train engine and like just like a worm and like killing and eating someone, and then he goes back through a tunnel and it just loops like that forever. It's so terrifying. I fucking love it. It's so good.
When I was at a convention a couple years ago, actually it would have been a little bit more than that because this would have been pre-COVID, but I was at a convention once and there was an art booth that sold holographic prints, and the prints were done in the style of like old school portraits of fictional characters. When you walked to the other angle, the portrait turned into this like weird decaying dead skeletal version of them. And like there's like the generic shit you would see there, like you'd see a portrait done like that of Darth Vader and you walk to the side and it's like Anakin burned alive, so like, you know, stuff like that's kind of cool. But you see other ones there too where it's like Dora the Explorer, and then you turn the corner and it's just like dead and decaying Dora.
Yeah,
and I don't understand the appeal of that.
I don't know, man. There is just something to like, here's this sweet little innocent thing, and now here it is, just the most fucked up thing you could think to do to it. It's like a fucking formula for success. You know,
it's like when we talked about Spencer and Locke, though, right? It's like there is this impulse to turn like a thing meant for children into like this weird, deeper, scarier thing that is not for children, and how that comic kind of made fun of that impulse by turning it into the most ridiculously adult thing possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know, and I generally I like when things do this to an extent. Sometimes I think that people go way too overboard with it. Like I liked the joke that someone made about this, where it's like, for every innocent children's show is actually some kind of fucked up theory thing, I'm going to make highly raved about adult show is actually some silly bullshit. So it's like, Game of Thrones is just a D&D campaign with the most fucking bitter DM who just keeps killing everybody's characters. And fucking Breaking Bad is just a class fan fiction about their teacher that's gotten like really far out of hand. Just shit like that of like, yeah, no, that's adorable. I love it. Like the opposite of it can be fun too when you take something like terrifying and you make it like cute and wholesome, like, you know, Cthulhu, right? They did that to death with Cthulhu. But there is something that's just like it's like primed for it. Like Freddy Fazbear takes like that like slightly unsettling thing of like your Chuck E. Cheese and your shitty restaurant animatronics and just made the whole Five Nights at Freddy's, just made a whole fucking franchise out of, these are a little bit creepy, right? Like just objectively, these things that mimic human life and movement and stuff and are there with the intent to entertain children are just in and of themselves kind of terrifying.
Yeah, porcelain dolls is one where I don't know in what time period these were acceptable gifts for children, but they have always just been fucking terrifying.
Dude, when I worked at Goodwill, there was a time where we got just this like we'd get these giant blue bins that everything was stored in, right? And we got just a huge one. I'm talking like these things were like 3 foot deep, 4 feet wide, right? Just a whole thing full of porcelain doll parts. Like the heads and the fucking arms and legs and bodies like all separated out. And it's just objectively the most terrifying thing I ever saw.
Every time I see a porcelain doll, I'm like, this is the kind of shit that Sid would have in his house in Toy Story.
Yeah, I know. They're fucking like we'd get them donated like all the time as like completed porcelain dolls. I'm like, God, these are all so fucking creepy. I just want to like.
No wonder you're getting them donated. No one fucking wants them in their house.
For real, like it's just like clowns, right? We're like,
yeah, fuck clowns.
Clowns will never be funny again. We have just made them terrifying, and I think porcelain dolls are very much the same way. They're like, it would be subversive at this point to make a porcelain doll sweet or cute. That would be the subversion, because just every time you see a porcelain doll in anything ever, it's always terrifying.
One of my favorite things that we've come to historically is I wrote a thing a while ago for one of the articles I was doing on Batman, and I made the point that like the kind of idea behind Batman early on was Batman's a dark, scary thing that's actually a good guy, and his foil is the Joker, which is supposed to be a funny, cute thing that's actually terrifying. And no one understands that anymore because there is no universe in which clowns are not terrifying.
I mean, pretty much, like, on the porcelain doll point, right? Like, and this is why I don't mind, like, bringing up movies a little bit, but I don't want to talk about, like, the movies themselves. I just want to talk about the visualizations that they put on screen. Like Annabelle, right? And I don't really care for the Annabelle universe, The Conjuring. I don't really care for any of those movies, but I think Annabelle is fascinating because Annabelle is based off of a real-life haunting experience, and how much stock you put into those, your mileage will vary. But, like, Annabelle is a real doll. You can go to a little museum and see the real Annabelle doll. And it is a fucking Raggedy Ann doll.
Yeah.
But when they wanted to visualize it on screen and make it terrifying, they pick a fucking porcelain doll and they give it like the cracked face and like the creepy smile and like the stringy hair that's like just kind of out of place, and like everything is just too perfect on it and too wrong, and it like does the head tilt stuff. It's not. The real thing this is based off of is a fucking Raggedy Ann doll, which is the furthest you can get. Fucking Leah has a Raggedy Ann doll in her room right fucking now. And I am not scared of that thing. Put a fucking porcelain doll in there. I'm like, nah, that's gonna. If it doesn't give her nightmares, it'll fucking give me nightmares. Thinking about all the things it's gonna do to my child in there alone.
It is kind of funny how Annabelle the porcelain doll is more terrifying than the stitched up serial killer in a doll's body in the form of Chucky.
Yeah,
like nothing about Chucky is anywhere near as scary as a porcelain doll.
Chucky's like whole thing, the visualization for Chucky is so at odds, and everything about that movie is so at odds with what would make that concept terrifying. And unfortunately, you just can't do it now because they've made the Chucky movies and everyone gets it. But like, you could have made a really good Chucky movie if you just kept that twist a twist, Yeah, it kills me every time.
Bringing it back to your original premise here of like horror art, when you said that, my brain instantly went to the painting The Scream. Because when I think of like horror art or like visualizations of horror in art, that's kind of like my apex of like, okay, this is what we mean by how do you channel something scary into an image. And the sort of simplicity with how that painting is all about the idea of existential dread, and like it's just this lone solitary figure on a pier with the infinite void of the ocean behind him just screaming into the void, and that's kind of the representation of the primal fear of just existing. That I think really works in that context, but is also something that we've used in a lot of other media to kind of do the same thing of just like this one slightly distorted figure that is deeply human because they're just so fed up with existing that I think kind of transcends that medium. The Halloween movies kind of do this too. When Halloween Ends was coming out, which I mean it's only 2 weeks old, but like when it was doing the social media rounds, the Twitter account like posted a still of the original movie and a still that was from the new movie that are kind of similar. They're not a recreation, but they're similar. Where Laurie is on the left-hand side of the frame and she's like leaning against the wall, and then there's the doorway to the other room, and then Michael comes out of it. And the tweet was something like a spot the difference, and it was just trying to be cheeky because they're similar shots. And everyone was raking the new one over the coals because the original is this really beautifully framed shot of like Laurie on her own with the infinite vastness of the void, blackness behind her, kind of like the Scream, trying to breathe the sigh of relief. And there is just this tiniest cut from the black that is Michael's unfeeling, unempathetic face. And then there's the new shot where it just kind of looks like he's a sad kid who spilled the milk trying to get mom. It's just, there's nothing scary about it at all.
Yep. You know what you talking about, like classical art that put this in my head? Fucking Saturn devouring the sun, which I realize is like,
oh, that's so freaky.
Yeah, but unfortunately it's like it's gotten memed to death, so it's not like as scary as it used to be, you know? Like just but that fucking image is so fucked,
it's
man.
Grotesque, right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to copy it and send it, but all the images I pull off Google are too big to send through Discord, so we'll just have to think about it. But yeah, if you've never seen, like, if you've only seen the meme, go look at the original. It's like, fuck, right? Like, there's just, again, to that point about exaggeration, you know, the length of the mouth, the way the face is just opened up, the body of the devoured child and stuff. There's so much going on there. The eyes are just gigantic in this. There's so much going on, and horror just lends itself so well to that exaggeration, because the second you take something that's of that human form and you start to make it like more and more uncanny and more just wrong in just the right ways, you go to horror so quickly. Because like it's funny, there's a spectrum here where like if you do it and it's like unintentional, you can get art that looks like dopey and just kind of like stupid, like this guy's out of practice. But then you do it just that extra little bit and you get like, oh, that's fucking creepy. And that's where like you'll get a lot of horror art, especially in the online culture. You'll get a lot of horror art that I don't think was intended as horror art, but it was just bad art that someone did. But because their level of into the uncanny with like exaggeration done through incompetence mostly of not understanding things like anatomy and whatnot, but just trying to make art, you get like these weird crossovers, which is kind of I think why you get like so much just weird horror stuff with fucking Sonic the Hedgehog, because there's so much like bad Sonic art out there, and it just kind of like becomes like really unsettling and creepy because, you know, just fucking kids that don't know what they're doing. It's just fucking weird, man.
Do you and to kind of tie this around like how they can go back and forth between like a comforting image to a creepy one? Do you remember about 10 years ago, might have been a little bit more, where there was that really famous Jesus portrait, this fresco called the Ecce Homo,
where they made like just completely fucked his face.
Yeah. So for 10 years ago, there was this old painting of Jesus in Brazil, I think, or Spain actually. There was a Spanish painting of Jesus that was done like in the early 1900s. It was this fresco on a cloth, and so like over time, moisture had caused the ink to kind of flake off. And so, one of the people that lived in the monastery where that painting was held got permission from the clergy to do a restoration of it. And the restoration turned into this like weird impressionist Jesus where he's kind of got like a mane and his face is off, and like people made fun of it relentlessly. But over like the last few years, it's kind of come back around a little bit because the person who restored it wasn't even like an artist. It was just like some 80-year-old dude who got permission to say like, oh, I felt bad that it looked bad. But it's kind of become this weird underground sensation because it took this comforting image of a in pain Jesus and turned it into something that's actually kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been parodies of it that have cropped up in other things where they take that same sort of meme look and it just turns into this weird disfigured monster thing. Like Department of Truth has a monster. Department of Truth's main character is a person that grew up during the Satanic Panic, and when all the schools were being accused of like hiding weird Satan cults back in the day in like the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And there is like a weird sort of satanic monster in that book that kind of reminds me of the restored Jesus fresco. And it's kind of went all the way around from like innocent meme to being actually kind of creepy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's so funny how just the slightest things just start going wrong and wrong and wrong, and you just like bleed into horror and things just look wrong. And then so it's impressive that you can have someone that's like an actual trained artist and they can recognize these things and know what to begin to exaggerate and what to do to really start to turn some shit, you know? Mm-hmm. Again, toward that like that corruption of innocence thing. Watch an artist YouTuber, and he does like a lot of coloring book videos, which is fun to see. Like, here's these things that you think of as kids scribbling with crayons, and I'm going to take like a professional artist attempt at how to color this image in. And one of the things he did, and I'm really disappointed that he's never done one like this again, is he took an image from the Jungle Book and he like, all right, I'm going to do a horror twist on this. I'm going to add elements to the drawing. I'm going to change expressions and stuff. And I'm going to make this like horrifying. It's like fucking Mowgli tried to like stab Baloo, but like the fucking bear is just like hungry and eating, and like the blade didn't do enough, and now he's like fucked, and like Mowgli's face is all terrifying, and Baloo's like got blood dripping out of his like sharp ass teeth. I'm like, God, it takes so little to completely fuck something, and just make it like, shit, man. Now it's like actually like 100%. This is actually scary as shit. And I fucking love it.
The Michael Myers mask, I think, is always a really cool example of this too, because and this is pretty famous at this point, but originally when the movie was getting made, it was a very, very small production, and everything was kind of just done on set with the random bullshit that they would find in department stores. Jamie Lee Curtis's entire wardrobe for that film, her and Deborah Hill just like went to JCPenney with $100 and were like, okay, what do teenage girls wear? They filmed the movie in the summer, so they had like 4 bags of leaves that they blew around and then had to go and pick up and rebag and use again throughout the filming of the whole movie. Mm-hmm. They didn't have pumpkins, so they had to like paint gourds to look like pumpkins and shit. And there was like one pumpkin that they could use that had to be shattered in the movie later. So they waited until the very last minute to do that one scene that takes place early on. But anyway, part of that story is the John Carpenter sent a guy over to the store to be like, okay, go find me a scary mask. And so he gets 2 options. He gets like a clown mask, which is a clown mask that Michael ends up wearing at the beginning of the movie. And then there's like a William Shatner Captain Kirk mask from the 70s. And so with the William Shatner mask, they kind of just shave off the sideburns and they just like paint it white. But otherwise, it's just a straight up Captain Kirk mask. So they do a costume test, and he comes out with like the overall, not the overalls, but like the coverings and the clown mask, and people are like, yeah, that's kind of scary, that's kind of creepy, that's hard to look at. Now let's do the other one. So then he goes back and he switches out and he puts the Michael Myers mask on, and everyone was just dead silent. And like there was legitimately something deeply unsettling about this face that was blank and expressionless and had no empathy behind it. And part of what makes that movie work so well and what made that mask so scary is because how much it kind of counts on the idea that human beings are trained to find faces and use that as a metric to tell whether or not they're safe or they're in danger. And when you look at a face like that, that's recognizable as a face, but has no recognizable emotions, your body doesn't know what to do. So it's just kind of instinctively designed to be afraid. And that kind of like shape and empathy theory that goes behind making things scary, I always really like. Like the fear of organic circles is another one, where if you're afraid of like weird organic circles like seeds and stuff, it's because evolutionarily things that have a lot of condensed organic circles tend to be poisonous. So a lot of people are just kind of conditioned to like look at that and feel kind of uncomfortable, because if you went out in nature and saw that, you'd probably die. And so they use that too in like a lot of like old school depictions of Vertigo, not the movie, but like the feeling of Vertigo does the same thing, where it's all organic circles kind of looped around because it instinctively makes us afraid.
It's fascinating to see how things are like what that is playing on, how the psychology works behind those ideas. Because you don't do this for comedy, right? Like something's funny, it's just funny, right? Like someone getting slapped with a fish, there's no like deep meaning to that. It's just, yeah, it's just unexpected, boom, haha. Action,
yeah, we don't have like a genetic predisposition to like wife jokes are funny.
Yeah, like action is just, it's cool, it's impressive, it's big, it's fast, it's intense, it gets your heart pounding. There's really nothing else to it. It's not like trying to capitalize on particular like psychological phenomena besides just you're drawn to flashy, right? Whereas horror's got so much going on behind the scenes for what is visually engaging and what is particularly like terrifying about horror. And of course, it's also fascinating that like some people are just immune to it, right? Like fucking, oh my god. One year we should just talk about it on Geeky Gentleman, which it would be hard because it's really short, all things considered, for how long we talk about stuff. But like the fucking Thriller music video, right?
Oh my god, yeah.
Like the fact that starts as a thing and then Michael Jackson turns into a werewolf and it just cuts out to, no, it's a bunch of teenagers in the 80s watching a horror movie, and Michael Jackson's just sitting in the audience and he's like, smiling and eating his fucking popcorn and stuff, right? It's like so good. Because like there's that portion of the population that is just fucking fearless when it comes to this, and it's funny because I remember being that. Particularly when I was a teenager, I remember not being afraid of horror, about not like finding a lot of this imagery particularly creepy, particularly scary. I was more or less unfazed by it. Like the jump scares always got me because there's no like, there really isn't much art to a jump scare. Like you can do them and they're well executed jump scares and cheap jump scares, but like end of the day, it's very similar to that action movie thing. Yes, I'm not really scared of a jump scare, right? I am surprised by it. That is the reaction you get. And sometimes they're coupled with something that is genuinely upsetting and visually terrifying, but most of the time a jump scare is just a cheap trick. It wasn't until my like late 20s that I started to actually be like profoundly affected and find myself kind of like getting a particular reaction out of horror imagery. I guess, let me rephrase that. Getting the desired reaction out of horror imagery.
I think a lot of that too is, I think it can vary based on how your relationship to art changes as you grow older, or maybe what it's like when you're younger, or if you're just like this all the time. Because so much of horror in particular, not necessarily, not that other things don't need this, because they do, but it works on a different degree. So much of horror kind of requires you to feel empathy for and feel like you're in the moment of a thing being scary. You kind of have to grant it a lot more than you do other things. Like, you can just walk in on a scene in a comedy and laugh at the joke because the context might make it funnier, but a funny joke's a funny joke regardless. And an action movie's kind of the same way, where like if you just like walk in and you're seeing like the fucking tank on the highway in Fast and Furious 6, well, that's just its own thing. You don't have to worry about thinking about that too hard. But with like horror and creepy things, as you start to kind of like search for that empathy component or that idea of meaning behind the image, or if you have like a well-established history with the thing they're inverting, then I think it just kind of plays off of you a little bit more. Doing a lot of these like twisted horror versions of children's things, I think, start to hit when you get older because you have such fond memories of that stuff growing up. Like Courage the Cowardly Dog is one where that show was fucked up even as a kid. That show had creepy images even when you were like 7 years old. But as we've gotten older and as like the voice actors and stuff have died and as they've brought that character back in like Scooby-Doo crossovers and stuff, you see all of this art of like grown-up, adult, mature people taking their talents to take the simplistic designs of that show and giving them like a realistic edge that are like legitimately kind of terrifying. And I think part of it is because you remember what it was like to be freaked out by that image as a kid, and now that you've kind of grown up alongside it and you see it kind of meet you on your level and you're allowing yourself to find what exactly about this has stuck with you, you're more susceptible to it when it's actually like legitimately scary.
No, I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's just, I don't know, there's a lot of art that goes into it, and sometimes it's a lot of luck, but there's so much thought and work that goes into the art of producing something terrifying that I feel is just like underlooked. Like, horror is always seen as such a cheap or like unimportant genre of filmmaking, you know? Or not even just filmmaking, of art in general. Like, we don't seem to put as much gravitas, as much appreciation into horror. And really, just every single aspect. Again, the art form itself, producing a single image of terror, is just so impressive. The Crypt Keeper. Oh my fucking god, I love how good the Crypt Keeper in the television series for Tales from the Crypt looked.
Oh yeah.
Instantly iconic. Absolutely terrifying. And then so much of that is just subverted with the way he acts and how he's just a fucking cartoon, you know? There's so many great like just beautifully iconic and terrifying designs in horror that are just like absolutely mesmerizing when you think about the amount of work and the amount of like just unhinged god what the fuck went into him. Brundlefly. Every evolution of how bad Jeff Goldblum starts to look throughout that movie is just one on top of the other. Because like there's always this thing of the monster movie where like, oh, we don't want to show the monster because actually it does kind of look kind of bad, but if we get you in the right headspace and then we show it, then it's actually going to look scary. I'm like, nah, fuck that shit. I want the monster design to look scary no matter how much of it I fucking see. And I think The Fly is a good example of that, where like, yeah, you only get like a little bit of the fully animatronic The Fly thing, but like, if they wanted to, they could have shown that through more of the fucking movie, because every fucking scene and evolution of Brundlefly looks more and more terrifying.
Yeah, no,
impressive as fuck.
No, I completely agree with you. I feel like, yeah, atmosphere, mood setting kind of plays into whether or not something is scary, but like if it's scary enough that it almost doesn't matter. It's still gonna fuck you up a little bit. I think the newer It movies with Pennywise, they're kind of hit and miss on this, but when they hit, they really hit.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a moment in chapter 1 where he's got like his head on backwards and he's like running across the room with like spider legs. And like it doesn't matter if he was in that form for like 30 seconds or 3 hours, it's fucking scary.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way around that. Or even at the very beginning of that movie where he bites off Georgie's arm and he's got like that infinite regressive mouth with all of the weird like worm teeth coming out of, like, that's just fucking scary. There's no way around it.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of it, just again to get to like the psychology of just creating these horrific visuals, is just there's so much like primal, deep-seated stuff. Like we are instinctively terrified of certain things just outside of the human body, and especially when you put those things on the human body, right? Like the second you give like humans with like pincer arms, like, you know, fucking this goes a little bit out of horror, but they're like the more monsterish characters in the franchise. Mortal Kombat, you got like Baraka and Melina, right?
Baraka's
like,
freaky as shit.
Yeah, he's got like he's a humanoid form, but he's got like the blades coming out of his arms, and he's got the like sharpened teeth and stuff. And then Melina, like, it's so funny the memes that have been created for her, but like, you know, oh, okay, so it's the same as this other sexy girl, but this one's pink. And then, like, you just, the fucking, until she takes off her mask. It's like, oh, holy shit, nope. There's fucking, like, what do they call them? Where they take the CG models and make them fuck, SFMs or whatever. There's fucking versions of that where it's like, Melina giving head. I'm like, nope, could never fucking watch that in my entire life. That's just, nope. No.
Oh, I didn't even need that in my life.
Yeah. Fuck you, Steve. You'd do it. You would stick your dick in that.
I can fix her.
You would absolutely stick your dick in Melina's mouth. Don't you fucking lie to me. Seems like, oh, fuck that. Meanwhile, pulling up fucking Pornhub to have it shit.
Yeah, let me see this video I need to avoid. If I know where it is, it'll be so easy not to find.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's just like it's just like instantly creepy and like terrifying when you start to take those like horror, those elements that are found in the natural world but not on the human form, and then add them to the human form. Fucking like it's so weird that it's like one of those classic horror movies, and a lot of those classic ones just, they're not scary anymore. Like, legitimately, if Leah had not started to develop a little bit of like a afraid of the dark thing right before Halloween, or right before, not Halloween itself, but October this year, Haley and I were having conversations. I'm like, we could probably let her watch one of like the old black and white ones, like one of the old werewolf or Dracula movies or something. Those aren't really scary. Those are just, you know, weird, and people didn't know what to expect on film, so they're not really scary anymore. The one that I still think is fucking terrifying, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh god, that movie rules.
Oh, it's so fucking creepy. Like, anthropomorphizing people, like, against their will is gotta be one of the most, like, fucked up things in the world.
Well, even like the poster for that movie is creepy as shit, with like the full black outfit and lanky dude with the messed up hair. Like, something about that old school German expressionism which just always hits.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's just that I remember with Milan making the joke that the fucking Rob Schneider movie, The Animal, needs to be remade as just a straight up horror movie, because that's such a fucked premise, man. He's a cop, and he gets in a really bad accident, and he wakes up in this dude's barn, and the dude has just attached fucking animal parts to him.
Ugh.
What the fuck?
Yeah, no thank you.
It's fucking horrifying. easily the scariest.
Have you seen any of the Transformers versus Terminator crossovers or anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. There's a comic. I don't know how old this is at this point, but there was an old like IDW Optimus Prime versus the Terminator, like Transformers Terminator crossover. And IDW does this with like all of their weird IPs. Everything just kind of crosses over at some point or another. But the reason I bring it up is that one of the posters for the issue is Optimus Prime's head, and it's been broken into, and you see the Terminator skull with the red eye beam coming out. And not only is that creepy as shit, but when I first saw that, my immediate instinct was that original Terminator movie and the original poster with like the skeleton, the robot skeleton with the red eye and stuff. That's still kind of creepy. Like that original movie is kind of like a thriller horror movie before it's an action movie. And the premise is the premise is like so kind of generic, but the imagery of that poster and like that beaming red eye, that just kind of does something, I feel like.
I'm trying to find the poster you're talking about, because I just look up the poster and all I see is Arnold.
Here, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
This is an Amazon link, so like you'll just see the cover for it.
Fair enough. Oh, okay. Alright.
That's cool as shit, right?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I meant like the original Terminator poster.
Oh, that Terminator poster.
Yeah, I'm looking it up, and all I find is like Schwarzenegger, and there's like a couple things with where you've got like the skull starting to show, but I don't see anything that's just the robot.
Yeah, there's a poster of the original Terminator that's literally just like a partial shot of the skull head, and it's just like a beaming red eye.
Okay, I'm not finding it anywhere. Interesting. I don't know. There's something to it. The fact that Terminator 1 is a horror movie and Terminator 2 is firmly an action movie. And yeah. They've never, for all their failed attempts with the Terminator franchise to give it a good sequel after Terminator 2, and no one has thought, let's go back to horror. It's such a weird thing to me. They just keep trying to like lean harder and harder into action.
There was also like this like nice little heyday of body horror stuff, like you mentioned The Fly, but like even the original Terminator, where like the fact that Arnold was like peeling back his skin to reveal this robot part, like that's freaky. That used to be freaky.
Yeah, body horror just has a whole ass genre. Like even when it's not like, you know, external things or like, you know, humans with animal parts or whatever, like I mean, it's just a meme at this point, but it is the most fucked up thing ever, is the fucking human centipede, right? Like, that's just surgery and fucking with the body, and it's just, you know, yeah, that's just what I want to do, is I want to stitch a bunch of people together to make a human centipede. What the fuck? Just when you start when you start to do shit with, like, the, just surgery against your will is scary as fuck every goddamn time.
Well, I mean, surgery in general can be kind of freaky, but like, yeah, that kind of like you wake up and oh shit, where's my arm? There's an episode of Buffy the Vampire, not Buffy, it was actually Angel. There's an episode of Angel in season 5 where there's a girl, basically at the end of season 7 of Buffy activates all of the dormant slayers around the world. So any girl that would have become a slayer had Buffy died just becomes a slayer. And in Angel season 5, they do this horror episode where there's a girl who was kidnapped and basically just like assaulted by this guy, and she gets thrown into an insane asylum because she like literally got driven mad by this whole kidnapping thing. And then she gets slayer powers one day just randomly. So she busts out, and she's kind of been traumatized into thinking Spike's the guy who did it to her, even though he's not. And so she kidnaps him and puts him under. And when he wakes up, his hands are missing because she's cut them off surgically because she doesn't want him to touch her anymore. Jesus and it's the Christ. Freakiest thing ever.
Jesus fucking Christ, that's terrifying.
Yeah, like he literally wakes up and like his hands are just gone. It's so scary.
Yeah, no, that's like just showing that on screen or just doing like an image like that where someone's getting fucking like cut into against their will. It's just so terrifying. Um, and especially like when they show you stuff of like someone's just completely powerless in the moment. Like I don't like torture porn in general. I don't really like Hostel, but just
Yeah.
god damn, that is like undeniably that is just a fucked thing to have to like imagine and to see someone go through. Just sitting there and being like, tormented in that way.
Are you familiar at all with dark academia?
No, I
Like
don't
the
think
the
so.
aesthetic? If you go on Pinterest or TikTok, there's like this newer trend called dark academia, which is basically just like how do you combine modern decorating and aesthetic sensibilities with like an old school gothic look. And so everything is kind of like how do you get clutter to look good? How do you get like horror movie posters and stuff that can be incorporated as like art pieces in your house? How do you like what kind of books should you have and how should they be bound to kind of give that earthy gothic vibe in a modern setting? It's actually kind of cool and you can get some really cool fun aesthetic choices behind it. My friend actually decorated his apartment almost entirely under that principle, and it looks dope as shit. But Dark Academia is really cool because it can recontextualize a lot of like things that are horror art into just being kind of cool decorative pieces. So like there are these prints you can buy of the old 1930s Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein movies, but they're not like stills of the movie. They're just like production shots.
Mm.
But they're framed, and if you put them together, they kind of look like just their own little individual art pieces. So like there's this one of the old Frankenstein actor between takes like smoking a cigarette. And it's been cropped out slightly, so it's just like now this chill poster of Frankenstein with a cigarette. And so there's this cool like balancing act between how do you make something that's supposed to be scary and moody and use that to make it inviting and moody at the same time. And I really like that. I feel like if you had infinite time and space and you could just kind of decorate a house around that vibe, it would look really cool.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like we're drifting a little bit from the topic, but it's fascinating. I don't know, just the way in which we do things to visualize horror. What are some of your favorite like monster designs? Can be from comics, books, movies, what have you.
I will actually pull this one up because it's a newer one, but I do still think it's freaky as shit. But Department of Truth, I mentioned it earlier in the conversation. But there's this monster in the early issues of it. Basically, this kid grows up during the Satanic Panic, and the way that book works is that if you believe something, if enough people believe it, then that thing becomes a reality. And it's basically just about that process of how do you collectively make people believe something, whether or not it's true. And the kid who grows up to be the main character, he gets told that there are Satan worshippers at school, and enough people believe it so that it actually happens. And so he's got this memory as a kid of being taken out back into his school and seeing like this star-faced monster that like eats babies. And the idea behind it was that this thing would like tell you not to mention it to anyone or else it'll eat you. And so he never mentions it to anyone. And so it kind of lives and dies off of that belief system. But it's called like the Star-Faced Man. And it's just freaky, man. It just looks creepy as shit.
That's not Dave McKean art, is it?
It's not Dave McKean, but I see why you would say that.
Yeah, it's just
even
that's...
like there's even an image of like what the kid drew him to be, and like if you Google it, just Google like Department of Truth Star-Faced Man. Like it's freaky as shit.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's pretty fucking good. my go-to is Freddy Krueger. Like,
Yeah,
Freddy
that's a great
Krueger, just on a, like, premise level is great and all, and I can talk about, like, Freddy Krueger coming for you in your dreams all fucking day, but, like, just this fucking burned to never, like, this person could never survive this level of burns. And he's just walking around, he's got the glove and the claw and the stretch, and, like, there's that shot in the first movie where he's walking down the alleyway and he puts his arms out like wide, like he's pretending to be an airplane or some shit, and then they just stretch and the fucking start clawing the walls of the alley. Oh, fucking god, Freddy Krueger is
I like
so
the
fucking
asymmetry
scary.
of his design because I feel like we went through 13 of those movies and we never once made him like dual wield the razor glove, which I think would have looked really stupid. The idea that he's just got the one hand with the blades on it is just really fucking cool.
Dude, fucking Robert Englund got so much mileage out of that fucking glove and all the shit he would do with it. Just like the way
so
he'd
cool.
tap it on his face, and he just like, such a good fucking prop.
It's such a cool. I mean, there's a reason why like New Nightmare like opens with making the glove, and then the glove murders someone because it's freaky.
Yeah, no, for sure. And New Nightmare is like the one thing that's like drastically redesigned Freddy, but even then, it's really not like a lot of drastic changes, right? It goes for more like exposed muscle as opposed to burns, but you're still working at like this really fucked up skin. They don't really change the glove. They like integrate it, meld it into his hand.
Yeah, New Nightmare's like big difference really is just that he doesn't have the hat and he's got that big blue overcoat, but like otherwise he's basically still just Freddy.
Mm-hmm. No, it's solid fucking shit. And even then, that movie capitalizes a lot on the original design aesthetic for Freddy. And just the like times that Nancy has seen him around the town and shit.
I know you and I rag on this a lot, but the Xenobites look cool as hell.
Oh yeah, like fucking, it's so ridiculous, but like the fact that Pinhead is the one that has become iconic out of those bunch.
I know.
Fucking Chatterbox is so like that's what they should have done for the fucking Hellraiser franchise. Instead of just bringing Pinhead back over, they should have given each of them their own fucking movie, right?
I know. I want the backstory for each of those motherfuckers. They all look cool as shit.
Yeah, no, for sure. The fucking females, Xenobite and shit, she's scarier than Pinhead. All of them look fucking creepier than Pinhead. Pinhead looks the dumbest.
And then this has also been a theme this year for us, but fucking Predator.
Yeah, fucking Predator. Predator design, fucking dope. Pussy mouth.
I like the alien design a lot too, but as far as like a monster goes, I like the Predator more, I think.
I mean, it's hard to beat Geiger. Like, if we're talking about just visualizing horror, Geiger's like the guy. Like, it's hard to think of a person that is considered a mainstream artist that just does anything but horror, Geiger's kind of the go-to. Like, as far as mainstream artists that can be recognized for their art that is objectively terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, the Alien movies have an amazing aesthetic. I think the thing about the Alien, the Xenomorph versus the Predator design, where I think the Predator is a little better, is where I feel like it's more versatile and more functional, because we mentioned this before, but like there's a difference between a thing being like just scary inherently versus scary because of the mood. And I think the Xenomorph kind of falls into that territory where like you look at the stills and the concept art that Geiger does for Alien, and it's all amazing. But the Xenomorph on its own, I don't think has that without you watching like the first Alien and getting that vibe.
Mm-hmm. I think that's reasonable.
Versus the Predator, which is just cool as shit.
I think that's a reasonable, conclusion. Because the Xenomorph, lends itself really well to the themes of Alien and what's going on with that movie. Yeah, it's a penis
monster.
Yeah, it's a penis monster. It rapes its way into you, and it rapes its way out of you, and then it rapes you to death. It's, that's all very effective for the film. But then, as those movies, gravitated more and more to whatever the fuck they became, a lot of that design sensibility became not necessarily at odds, but didn't really function alongside the like points of those movies and what they were trying to
Well,
become.
and like you mentioned before, with the way internet culture shapes some of this, but like the memes have just made it hard to find the predator or find the xenomorph scary. Like I've just seen too many funny versions of that to be afraid of it now.
Hug me, please. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. It is funny how, yeah, the internet keeps taking all the innocent childhood things and making them, like, terrifying, and then all the creepy things that you weren't allowed to see as a kid and making them cute. It's fucking, like...
This is why no one is safe.
Like, I remember right after It Chapter 1 came out, there was also the Babadook, and, like, the thing was, oh, they're in a relationship together. They're gay. And I'm like... What? Why?
The Babadook is a really good movie. I never found the Babadook himself to be particularly creepy, and I don't entirely understand how he became a gay icon, but okay.
I think it was just more the fact that, like, someone was bitching about everything had to be gay, and that they wish more things were just, like, you know, straight up and not trying to preach a message, and I think they used, like, the Babadook and It as their examples, and the ownage was, nah, fuck you, they're gay, they're in a relationship together, and then the internet just kind of fucking ran with it. I think that's the origin of that one, if you were curious.
Have you read a lot of old school Golden Age Batman comics, like before he gets Robin?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, a lot of the early Batman adventures, even some of the ones after Robin, are really cool if you want to go back and find like old school 40s pulp horror stuff. Because before like 1942, 43-ish, Batman comics were still kind of finding their voice. And if you go back and read like Detective Comics 49 when Clayface first shows up, Basil Karlo, he isn't like a clay monster. He's literally just a dude in a coat with a scary mask going around with a knife. It's really fun to look at those old horror tropes in old school Batman comics because Batman is supposed to actually be kind of scary in the context of those stories. So he fights things that are also kind of equally scary, like werewolves and vampires and serial killers with butcher knives. It's kind of bizarre to look at in retrospect because you'd think that like that would be an idea we would have later down the line as we try to like add more urban violence to Batman, like we did in the 70s and 80s. But early Batman comics are freaky for that exact reason, is that they didn't feel like they needed to play into the superhero tropes. They tried to play more into like the pulp detective and horror vibes, and you got a lot of cool images. My favorite Batman cover of all time is still from that era, where I think it's Detective 31 maybe, where it's Batman with the big spaced out ears looming over a gothic castle with like the smoke in front of it. Like that's a really cool kind of gothic horror image. I still think it looks dope as hell.
That's awesome. I don't know, man. I love horror art. I do feel is legitimately underappreciated. Like even just like the basic aesthetics of Halloween, right? Like,
yeah,
fucking jack-o'-lanterns. Like, I'm the jack-o'-lantern guy
so
now,
cool.
right? But like, they're just so fucking good as just this like icon of Halloween because they perfectly represent the holiday because you can make them silly, you can make them terrifying, you can make them all kinds of things. You can make them fit like anything really. And I just love how like creepy they are in that way. They're so versatile. But like just that like it's such a weird thing to do to cut a face into a fucking gourd. But people did it and now it's just a thing and it's fucking cool as shit.
The color palette too for fall and Halloween where it's black and oranges. Something about that just also really works and feels kind of cozy.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like if it's if it works because it's so perfect, or if it's so perfect because we've been doing it for so long, you know?
I mean, it's probably a little of column A, a little of column B, but I'm kind of okay with that. There is something you notice in people, because obviously you got to dress appropriately for the weather, but the fact that we've all just kind of as a society decided that certain things like flannel t-shirts only belong in the fall and are the things that you see with very specific color patterns that never exist outside of Halloween, I think is just kind of neat.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I don't know. Is there anything else we want to discuss with this? Because I'm pretty happy with everything I wanted to bring up so far.
The only thing I will say is, and we talked about movies more than I think you probably wanted us to, as this went on, but I want us to kind of go around at some point and go back to the cool minimalist movie posters specifically for horror movies. Because some of the coolest horror art, in my opinion, is just a cool as shit movie poster. The original poster for the VHS of Halloween, where it's the butcher knife coming down, but the curves line up with the pumpkin on the side. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to that. I need more of those.
Minimalist posters and minimalist art is just cool itself, and to see that blended with horror, which, as I was saying earlier, kind of like requires exaggeration a lot of the time. So it's interesting to see how you can get stuff across in that way. You get a lot with like vampire minimalism, where you'll just get like the fangs and the blood. Is the way a lot of people get across those ideas.
The Bram Stoker's Dracula poster, where it's like a gray tombstone with like the bat coming into the center, like that's cool as hell.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. All right, well, I think that's a pretty good roundup on all of this. I'm pretty happy with this discussion. Yeah, we did end up talking about movies a lot, but again, I'm glad that we didn't talk about like the art of making something scary in a movie. We just talked about like when the visuals hit and stuff. Okay. Well, Steve, we need a I guess I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to do discussion or review topic for the first episode of History Month?
First episode of History Month. Let us do Let's do a review, just to kind of keep the rotation going, and then when Alfie gets back for that, or if not, you can have the discussion topic, and we can maybe go from there. Okay. I don't know if you had anything planned for like a specific day in History Month or not.
No.
No? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do a review, just because reviews are fun. I don't know if you'll let me get away with this, but it's been on my brain for a little while, and I think it would just be kind of fun to talk about long form. It's also just a lot more lighthearted compared to some of the freaky shit we've been talking about for Horror Month. Would you be down to review just that one episode of Doctor Who, Vincent and the Doctor?
I think that's fine. It's a historical episode. I think that counts.
All right, cool. I've been wanting to just rewatched that like 2 or 3 months ago, but I want to rewatch it again. So that's my excuse.
No, that's fine. It's a historical episode of Doctor Who. I'll take it.
All right, hell yeah. Next time, Vincent and the Doctor for History Month.
Let's go. Alrighty. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am making us watch Doctor Who again.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Ha 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 ha!